The air hung heavy with the scent of wood smoke. Kasongo knelt, his head bowed as his father spoke. "My son," the old man's voice rasped, "you have been chosen to lead our people. Remember, power is a double-edged blade, it can protect or destroy." Kasongo, young and ambitious, met his father's gaze. "I will not disappoint you, father," he vowed. "I will lead with justice and fairness." The old man, his face etched with the wisdom of years, nodded slowly. He had seen the allure of power corrupt even the purest hearts. Kasongo, filled with a youthful fire, believed his promises. He would be different. He would lead with integrity. But the whispers of ambition had already begun to stir within him. Years passed. Kasongo's reign began with promise. He listened to the elders, he settled disputes fairly, the community prospered under his guidance. But power, like an insidious vine, began to wrap around Kasongo's heart. The trappings of his position, the fine clothes, the plentiful food, the unquestioning obedience, became intoxicating. He craved more. Land, once shared communally, became a tool for his enrichment. Kasongo seized the most fertile plots, leaving his people with scraps. Taxes, once minimal, increased, filling his coffers while emptying theirs. The whispers of ambition had become a deafening roar. Discontent simmered in the village. Farmers, their harvest meager, toiled under the weight of Kasongo's greed. Families went hungry, their pleas for relief ignored. Whispers of rebellion began to circulate. The elders, their advice ignored, watched with growing alarm. Kasongo, blinded by his own avarice, remained oblivious to the storm brewing around him. His wife, once his confidant, now looked at him with fear and disappointment. His children, raised on stories of his early integrity, saw only a tyrant. The seeds of rebellion, sown by Kasongo's own hand, were about to bear bitter fruit. The rebellion, when it came, was swift and brutal. It was led not by strangers but by Kasongo's own brother Adio. Adio, once loyal and trusting, had borne witness to Kasongo's transformation. He had seen the suffering of their people, the pain in their eyes, the fear in their hearts. Adio had begged Kasongo to change his ways, to remember his promises. His pleas fell on deaf ears. Now, Adio stood at the head of a throng of angry villagers, their faces illuminated by flickering torches. Kasongo, his face pale with shock and disbelief, realized too late the depth of his betrayal. Section 5. The walls close in. The palace walls, once symbols of Kasongo's power, now felt like a prison. His guards, their loyalty bought with gold, melted away before the fury of the mob. Kasongo, desperate and alone, knew his reign was over. He had sown the wind and was now reaping the whirlwind. His wife and children, their faces streaked with tears, clung to him. "We must flee," his wife whispered, her voice trembling. "There is no safety here for us now." Kasongo, his spirit broken, could only nod in agreement. Under the cover of darkness, Kasongo and his family slipped out of the village. They journeyed for days, their path lit only by the moon and stars. Fear gnawed at their heels, urging them onward. Finally, they reached the border of Ndagao, a neighboring nation. Ndagao was not known for its hospitality, but it offered the only hope of refuge. Kasongo, once a proud leader, now a fugitive, swallowed his pride and pleaded for asylum. The Ndagao guards, their faces impassive, granted them entry. Back in the village, the rebellion had triumphed. Adio, thrust into the mantle of leadership, struggled to restore order, but the thirst for vengeance, once unleashed, is difficult to quell. Kasongo's friends and advisors, once basking in his reflected glory, became targets. Some, deemed too close to the deposed leader, were rounded up and imprisoned. Others, their loyalty deemed suspect, met a grimmer fate. The village square, once a place of celebration, became a stage for public executions. The air reeked of fear and blood. News of Kasongo's downfall and the fate of his loyalists reached Ndagao. Kasongo, living a meager existence in exile, was consumed by guilt and remorse. His greed, his lust for power, had cost him everything. He had lost his home, his position, his friends. He was a shadow of his former self, haunted by the ghosts of his past. He spent his days in quiet contemplation, his only solace the presence of his family. The whispers of the wind carried to him tales of Adio's rule, of the village slowly healing, of his legacy being erased. Kasongo's name, once spoken with respect and admiration, became synonymous with greed and tyranny. Mothers used his story to warn their children about the corrupting influence of power. The once mighty leader was now a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the most promising individuals can be seduced by the dark side of ambition. And so, Kasongo lived out his days in exile, a broken man haunted by the consequences of his actions. His legacy, once filled with promise, was forever tarnished by his fall from grace.